Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kevin Askew from Programmer's Paradise, and welcome to our free webinar series, Maximizing Data Quality for Value and ROI. Today's session will cover CA ERwin R8, Getting Started. Our agenda today will cover a brief introduction on Programmer's Paradise, followed by the CA ERwin R8 webinar, hosted by Victor Rodriguez, our database modeling consultant here at Programmer's Paradise. Afterwards, we will have a Q&A session with Victor as well. Programmer's Paradise is a leading e-seller of developer and infrastructure tools. You can visit us on the web at www.programmers.com. The CA ERwin product falls under our database worldview ecosystem. We are an elite CA partner and the #1 data modeling reseller in North America. We have a dedicated CA sales and engineering team, and we provide database modeling and infrastructure design and training services. Also, under our database worldview, we provide industry-leading tools for your end-to-end database needs, including database platform, design and modeling, development and testing, management and administration, deployment and migration, performance monitoring and tuning, and reporting and mining. Previous sessions from our series can be viewed at www.programmers.com/CA. Without further ado, I will now turn things over to Victor to start the webinar. Victor?
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to take control of the presentation here now. If you bear with me for a moment. Today's presentation is going to be covering what you need to get started with ERwin R8. And we have a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get started. First of all, I'm going to do a little house cleaning here. We have some links that might be useful to some of you. If you have not currently running ERwin R8, you can use that bit.ly link that I have presented there, bit.ly/ERwin R8 download. This is actually an eval version of the download software, but this is the same software, and I'll discuss this in much more detail later on. But basically, we are now talking about one binary for all functionality of the ERwin software. You simply will get a license at some later point. So whether you want to test run it or you are off maintenance and you want to give it a shot, use this link. And of course, if you are a current maintenance customer, you can also use the same link to download the software, and then you can open a licensing ticket through CA to get your licenses. And we'll discuss how to license the software as part of the presentation. There's a data warehousing conference on March 14th and 15th in New York City. I'll be there, as well as there's some really good content if you'd like to attend. Bill Inman is there talking about the future of data warehousing. We also have Disney and UPS talking about big data, how you're going to handle that. So if that topic sounds interesting to you, look at that link. We actually do have some free passes as well. If you are interested and curious about, they're a very limited amount, but if anybody's interested, please contact us via one of the links we're going to have at the end of the webinar if you'd like to attend. And of course, if you do use that link there and attend, you also get, if you purchase a attendance link from their ticket, you'll actually get a $50 discount. And there's also a CA sponsoring like a happy hour afterwards, and if you'd like to just attend that, also contact us about that. Webinar replays are available from that third bit.ly link, data modeling webinars, and also, as Kevin mentioned before, the URL that you will be presented with at the end of the landing page after our presentation ends. A couple more links. There's a Philadelphia. We're having a dinner event, CA sponsoring it. It's at the Prime Rib, if anyone's familiar with it. An excellent 4-star restaurant. Free dinner, if anybody wants to attend. If you're in the area, look into it. Once again, click on that link and you'll get all the details. And if you're a consultant, for example, and you want to take out your clients for dinner, then feel free to just give us your information and we'll set it up, and should be a good time to just meet other people who are kind of doing the same type of things that your current projects that you're implementing. And lastly, we are going to start doing some R8 hands-on training. We're going to launch this in April. We have limited attendance for our first session, but if you are in the tri-state area, we are located in Shrewsbury, New Jersey. And if you just want to email us at ca.erwin@programmers.com and you want like pricing and other information like that, we're also going to have a web-based version of this. We're going to be talking about how are you going to migrate your models. Are you migrating from one tool to another? Do you need to integrate files from multiple systems? It's going to be very hands-on. We're going to show you how to do your current process using the R8 software. introduce you to the new topics, the things we're going to be seeing today, but in much more detail. And of course, any kind of hands-on issues you might be having migrating your environments, etc. So contact us if that sounds interesting to you, web-based and in-house training here as well. One last thing, we're going to have some polls today. So if you're not familiar with the WebEx polling, you're going to have a tab that's going to become active when the poll begins, and you'll be able to participate. It's anonymous, but feel free. Maybe it'll be fun. You get to see how the other users are using the software as well. And if you do want to chat via Twitter regarding this, the webinar, you want to do a live chat, use the hashtag ERwinWebinar if you want to communicate with each other. I obviously cannot tweet with you while we're having the presentation, but I'd love to hear the conversation after the fact. So feel free to, if you are Twitterers, enjoy that. So the agenda for today, the announcements, which we just covered. Now we're going to talk about licensing issues, and that's going to take up a significant piece of the early part of the presentation. And the rest of it is really just going to be drilling into all of the R8 features and just my personal experience. How are we, how am I using this? What am I encountering here just starting to use the software? What features do I think are most useful? And that's going to take up mostly the second half and more of this presentation. And then, of course, questions and answers. Please feel free to ask your questions and answers, but I will be answering them all at the end of the presentation. So, licensing. The way the method of licensing now is that we're now using a single binary for all versions of ERwin. And this screenshot is actually from the CA site, the ERwin site, that explains this in more detail, but I'll talk you through it. And basically what it means is that, like I mentioned before, if you download the evaluation version of the software, you actually will have an evaluation version of the tool. You're going to get the tool itself, of course, is going to install, and then you're going to have a license file that will automatically install as well, and that license file will actually give you an evaluation version of the software. There's a trial version. That trial version is going to give you the full feature version of the tool for a very limited amount of time, a certain number of weeks. Then above that, we have the standard edition. The standard edition is what we normally, previous ERwin users know as ERwin. This is just the full ERwin tool, exactly as with the feature set that you're familiar with previously. And then we have the Workplace edition, and what that actually allows us to do is have that collaboration. So the Workgroup edition is actually what we used to know as the ERwin and data model, the model manager, I should say. So ERwin and model manager as one tool. And I'm going to show you this during the demonstration, but it's really nice that now you're going to be doing all your model management and all your ERwin implementation, whether you're going to be initializing the model manager, upgrading the model manager, adding new users, administrating, or just doing your ERwin modeling. It's all through one single interface. So there's no need to have a separate install anymore. The Navigator edition, it's kind of branching off of this Workgroup edition, but of course it can also work with the standard edition. And this is just what we're familiar with in the past as Navigator. And then the administrator license, that gives you basically the whole entire Workgroup edition, which is just the standard model manager feature set, plus the ability of initializing a repository or upgrading, of course. So once again, it's one single binary. You just download one file, and then you request the licenses you need. And of course, based on your maintenance and what software you actually purchased, you'll be provided license files, which you will then place in the appropriate location. And I'll show you how to do that in just one moment. And what you're going to do is then unlock the functionality of the tool. So you download the file, install. These are license-based. Then you're going to be mailed this via the licensing team. The licensing team is going to provide you those license files. The licenses are Mac-based. So what happens is that you actually have to provide your MAC address to get your license generated, and then you need to have that MAC address. It will only run in that environment. And let me explain to you, there's some strategies there, because you may be wondering, how am I really going to handle that given certain different circumstances? So there's no conflict with R7. So just a couple pointers before I jump into the ERwin software. There's no conflict with R7. So if you have R7 running right now, you can continue to run R7. It's not a problem. You can just install ERwin R8 and put the two of them. The two can work, cohabitate in the same environment. There's no conflict. You'll be able to use applications that you may have developed for one versus the other, etc. So you can allow your team to transition. If you do want to go into production with R8 or share the work you're doing in R8, you can actually have the ability of saving those models back to 7.2.9 and also 7.3.8 through 7.3.10. So all those versions are supported. So feel free to just do it, like the Spike put out there, just do it, and there's no harm in trying it out, and you may find that you really like it. Now let me jump into ERwin for a moment, because I want to show you some issues with the licensing you may encounter. And let me just share my desktop. So this is the ERwin R8 software that we'll be looking at in much more detail. But the first point is, okay, I need to acquire my MAC address to get my license from the licensing team. Go to Help and click on Licensing. And what you're going to see here is you will normally see, almost everybody is going to see multiple MAC addresses here. In this case, I'm only seeing my wireless MAC address, but you can actually see like you may have a LAN address as well, and sometimes even others as well. My pointer to everybody is use your wireless MAC address when you give this to CA. The reason I specify this is that I had a specific issue where my LAN address was actually changing at different intervals. That actually made my license invalid. So be sure, or not be sure to, but my suggestion is to use the wireless MAC address, because that is not going to be changing as frequently, if at all. Second point is, what if you want to implement this in a virtualized environment? I can send you links if anybody's curious about this. This is kind of something that probably most of you are not going to be encountering, but if anybody's curious about this, you can actually specify a MAC address in VMware, for example, or any virtualization suite, and you can actually make that a static address. So that's what I would suggest in that particular case. The nice thing about that, of course, is if you need to push that out to multiple environments, you can actually lock those in place before you start the whole licensing process, so you don't have to deal with the issues later on where my MAC addresses and my address and my license files are not correctly aligned. Once you receive your licenses, and this is going to actually be right in an email, you just have to copy and paste those license files into the appropriate folder. But you can actually just go into the Help menu. And once again, these instructions are right in the email that you'll be receiving. But you can also just click on licensing information. And this gives you the exact instructions. For XP, you're going to place the file in this particular folder. For Windows 7 in this particular folder. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And it's right available from your help topics. So let me jump back to the presentation. And I did have a first poll question. I am curious to see what version of ERwin everybody's using. So are you currently, or I shouldn't say what version, but if you are currently using ERwin. So yes, no, or you used to, or you've never used it. So this poll will be open for 5 minutes, although most of you will answer it pretty quickly. Just submit, and then I'll read off or share the results when we're done. So the next licensing topic I wanted to cover is the Model Mart, and or this Workgroup edition, as it's known now with the R8 software. So the Workgroup edition is activated by licensing as well. It's just available from a different menu in the same ERwin software, which I'll show you in just a moment. And migration, by the way, I've actually migrated my model manager, and it took just a few minutes. It was like, it's amazing. If anybody who went through the 4.1.4 to 7 migration and knows how painful that was, this is just an incremental upgrade from the point of view of the metadata. Nothing's changed that significantly under the covers. So opening a model, the files are migrated on your initial open, and to be honest with you, it's not that big a migration step when you see the models actually opening from the Mart than you would have seen when you went from like 7.3.8 to 7.3.10 or something like that. Each model might take 30 seconds to a minute and a half to open, depending on how large they are. They'll upgrade to the R8 version, and they'll go through that post-load upgrade, that screen you're probably familiar with if you've used ERwin in the past. And then you save them back, and you just have to go through that one time. It doesn't take that long, but the Mart itself, actually connecting to the repository and saying this is now an R8 repository, it took me about 5 minutes, and I have a relatively large Mart that I was working with. So the downtime on that is pretty minimal. However, and this is a big caveat here, do not do this with your production model manager. Back in 4.1.4, if you migrated from 4.1.4 to one of the 7 versions, you ended up with 2 repositories, basically. That's not what's going to happen here. This is the metadata is locked down. This is very similar from 7.x to R8. So this is just kind of an incremental, at the metadata level, this is just an incremental upgrade. The underlying structure of the repository is going to stay the same, and it's going to be reused. So basically what I'm trying to say is that when you upgrade that R8, if you connect to the repository and you say this is now an R8 repository, your 7.x users cannot use that repository anymore. So if you're just currently QAing this, you're not actually ready to go into production, you're going to back up the repository just like you would do if you were QAing a new version of ERwin 7.x. You're going to restore it into a test environment, rename it to something like model Mart R8 or something like that, and then use that for the R8 repository. When you're ready to do the full migration, then you point everybody's software at the new repository. But absolutely do not just connect to your production environment and do an upgrade. You're going to lose connectivity. You're going to force everybody to go to R8 overnight. So that's definitely a key caveat on that. Can we see the results on the poll? Okay, and so definitely back up. We're just waiting a couple of more seconds for the poll to close. The other caveat I have there with the R8 software is I did have another point I was going to make on that. Oh, here's our poll results. Are you currently using ERwin? 76% yes, 2% no. 4% used to be users, and 4% never used. So pretty much kind of what I expected to see as far as the results are. And I have a second poll now, if everybody could just jump on this one as well. I'm just curious to see how many are actually using the model manager as well currently. And of course, are you not using it, or you used to use it, or you've just never used either of the tools? So when you're migrating from 7 to 8, like I mentioned before, absolutely remember to back up. That was the last point I was going to make on that. If you do want to know how am I going to, you may not have implemented this in the past, you want to actually do a backup, have a separate version of the model manager sitting out there, how am I going to actually implement that? There's a great technical document from the support team. If you go to support.ca.com and go to the ERwin page, it's a public doc. You don't even have to have maintenance to read it. And just put in like model Mart and backup or import, export. And it actually just talks you the process of backing up a repository for a test environment. It's the identical process you would do to set up a separate repository here for R8. So definitely that's a great resource and something to take into account, I should say, before you start any kind of migration path. Okay, so let's jump into ERwin. There's a whole bunch of features we're going to be touching on here. So the first thing I wanted to point out is when you install the software for the first time, and I just want to verify I'm not sharing my screen, okay. I just wanted to make sure that we're all seeing that. Here we go, excellent. So the first point I wanted to make out is that we're going to see a significant change here. There is the ability, we're going to see much more viewable area in our ERwin R8 due to these receding explorers and the different menus that we're used to seeing, the windows, actually the panes, I should say, that we've been seeing previously in R8, or up until R8, I should say. But when you open ERwin for the first time after the install, you're probably going to see something very similar to this. It's not going to look that different to the 7.x software. So to make that happen, what you do is you see these little pins. You actually just click on those pins, and that will make those windows recede. So now you have more viewable area to work with. And if you want to make those, activate those windows, you simply just mouse over the ones you'd like to see, and that's how you can make them. And you can actually resize them here. So this is a nice feature that if you need more, you want to be able to read longer names, for example, if your table names are very long or your attribute names, etc., that you can actually just click on them when you need them or mouse over them when you need them and then remove them when you're done. You can actually also move these. Like, for example, if I want to bring this action pane to another area in my display, the first thing you do is you pin it. And once you have it pinned, like you normally would expect to see, you actually just click it and drag it. Once you start dragging it, you see that these buttons become active here. And this allows you to place them anywhere you'd like in the display. So I'm going to put this one over to the right. and my Model Explorer is here also, which they're actually stacked one on top of the other, my action log and my Model Explorer. To move my Model Explorer back over to the left, I click on it here down at the bottom, and then I'm going to drag it over, and here it is, removed. And now I'm just going to click here, and now I have one on one side. And then once again, we click the auto hide here. We click on these little pins, and that will make them recede back into where they were before. So that's the first thing I want to bring up. I've got a long list of them to go through here. The next one is considerations when you're converting your files. So the first point is when you open a 7.x model, and let me open one here that hasn't been converted here. Let's see if this one's been migrated or not. So we go through post-load upgrade, which we're used to seeing, but there's going to be something different here in this dialog box. This is new. If even users of 7.x have not seen this before, we have the main subject area here, and it's got a little red flag, you'll notice, which just disappeared there. And then we have to actually resolve this question. And the question is, do we keep the main subject area or not? And then keep diagrams for main subject area or not. I'm going to discuss diagrams in much more detail a little bit further down in the presentation. But basically, there's a new concept here which kind of gives you multiple layers of designing. So you still have those subject areas, which we're all familiar with, and then you have diagrams, which kind of correlate to what used to be stored displays, but they're much more functional than stored displays, and I'll explain to you in more details how that is the case. But the key takeaway right now is that you do not need to keep your main subject area. For my personal preference, I say do not keep the main subject area unless, I mean, if you have a small model and all of your design work was in the main subject area, keep the main subject area. If you have a very large environment and the main subject area was just kind of accrued by building many different subject areas, which is often the case, you might have tens of thousands of tables and your projects really are implementing 4 or 5 subject areas that look at a couple of hundred at a time, then do not include the main subject area. It's going to make your model enormous. It's going to make your model slow. And the key takeaway from that is you can always rebuild the main subject area at any time. You can just simply create a new subject area and include every single object in it, and there you go, you have your main subject area. So to make the conversion fast, to make your model lighter, to take advantage of some of the new design features, I would say do not include the main subject area. With the caveat, of course, that I mentioned before, many times your main subject area may be your only subject area. If that's the case, obviously, then you want to maintain it. But for larger models, there's absolutely no reason to have that. I know for years people have wanted to not have main subject areas. Well, now you get your wish. You don't have to include them anymore. So our poll results. This is a good turnout for Model Manager users. I actually was expecting a lower number, but 41% are using the Model Manager, 31% are not, and 7% have used it in the past. Okay, so back to the presentation. So main subject area, you can actually, I would not include it by default. Another point I'd like to make about converting your model. So this is converting models from 7.x to 8.x. I'm just going to continue here. And that's going to close out this post-load upgrade screen. And then we have a converted model here. And there's a couple of pointers here that I'd like to actually discuss. My relationship lines are actually hidden in the background here, and I'll show you how you can actually bring them forward, because you're going to experience this. If you have drawing objects, by default, your relationship lines are going to be in the back, but I'll explain to you in just a minute how to resolve that as well. It's just basically a diagram setting. So, but as far as file conversions go, so first of all, exclude main subject area for very large models. You usually don't need them, and if you're going to, it's very easy to rebuild them. You simply add everything back in. I'll discuss diagrams a little more information, but what I'd like to mention is I know some people still out there are using 414, or they have 414 models laying around. If that is the case, you can, we have an added import bridge here, and if you haven't used the import in the past, definitely become more familiar with it in this version. This was already existed in 7.x, but this meta integration bridge actually allows import from many different file types, but one of them is ERwin 414, if I can find it here on the list. There it is. 3.x and 4.x. 4.x models, you can actually specify a .ER1 file. Oops, .ER1. So if you have .ER1 files laying around, legacy files that you need to upgrade, and in the past you may have said like, oh, I have to get like a special build from CA, and I have to upgrade to 4.1.4, and then I have to upgrade to this, to that, to the other one. You now have a direct path from 4.x to 8.x, which is going to be very useful. Another point when you do migrate your models is if we go to our model properties here, let me go to my physical model and look at my database. Target database. You'll notice now, in the case of Oracle, for example, we still have 10.x and 11.x are still bundled as one database target version. This is going to be separated out with full 11.x feature support in the next release, but at this point they're still bundled together. However, let me create a new model to show you this better detail here. SQL Server now, for example, has full feature support for 2000, 2005, and 2008. So let's say you have a 2008 environment. You've upgraded from SQL Server from 7.x to 8.x, and you want to. It's a 2008 environment, and up until now, it's been models have been defined as 2005/2008. After you do the upgrade, make sure to specify exactly the target database that you're using, 2008, for example, and this is going to enable all of those new features, those supported context-specific editors within the tool itself that will allow you to model all those features in the 2008 software. So make sure to specify that, as much granularity as possible. For example, you'll see DB2 now has a .I or a 4I, which is the old AS400, LUW, and the ZOS specification, and you'll see all the granularity you have here. So instead of, you might have seen in the past, you would have had just a 9.x. Make sure to specify exactly the target database when you upgrade your models or build new ones, because depending on what you specify here, you're going to activate all of that feature support within the editors themselves. Another pointer I'd like to bring up is for those of you who have used transforms in the past, the tool back in the 4.1.4 began in one of the 4.x releases, and all the way up through 7.x, you had the ability of having transforms, and these transforms would have logical versions of those objects and physical versions of those objects. And you probably experienced it, if you used a lot of these nested transforms, you probably experienced corruptions in your models. There is no longer transforms the way they used to exist in the software. So when you upgrade your models, you actually need to specify, and I actually should see if let me open a version of this to show you exactly what you're going to expect to see. I'll open a 7.x version of the same eMovies model that we saw earlier. And let's take this eMovies model here. And we'll see here we have the same thing we saw before, main subject areas, but we also have this transforms options here. You'll notice you need to either resolve all your transforms, reverse all your transforms, or convert transforms in their current state. And if you'd like to have more details on what each one of these means, there's a very descriptive explanation of what it is here. Resolve, of course, means that they're all going to be resolved. There will be no transforms at all in your model. Reverse means you're going to have only transforms in your model. There's going to be nothing transformed within after the modification. And convert means that in the cases where you have already transformed them, they'll be transformed. When they haven't been transformed, they will be basically reversed, in other words. You'll have a combination of both. For my preference, I would actually say do a reverse. The reason I say do a reverse, you can always apply the transforms within R8. If you resolve them all during the migration, you're not going to have the ability of having that decision later on. So I would do a reverse, and then of course go through them and apply the ones that you think you need to. If you have many transforms in the model, you may want to just do the convert transforms in current state if you don't want to actually go through them manually. But I would actually choose to do them to do the reverse so that I have that ability of going one at a time to have that flexibility in the future. The next feature I'd like to talk about here, there's a whole bunch of customizations in the tool. I'd like to talk about the ability here. We have all these toolbars available up top, and these can all be customized. So you'll see these little arrows here in the lower left-hand corner, and if I mouse over it, you'll see it says Toolbar Options. And what this allows me to do is to add or remove buttons to the existing toolbars. So you can actually specify which one you want, or you can do Customize, and then you could select any one of the toolbars here, and then you can add features to them. You can create keyboard shortcuts for any of these features, and then you could specify the type of options you'd like, whether you want to have large icons, for example, whether you do or do not want to show screen tips, which you were just seeing when I was mousing over. So a lot of customization. It's really nice. You can even create new toolbars. So like, for example, I might want to have my common tasks. So I click OK. It appears here. We see it appears right here in the toolbars, this little gray one here. Everything you're going to see throughout this presentation, as soon as you do it, it actually happens in the background. So you have immediate results, not only in the toolbars, etc., but in the design as well. And I'll show you that when we're looking more into at the object level of the software. But now common tasks, I want to start building some commands here for common tasks. I want new. I'm just dragging this right into my toolbar. I want to open models, of course. I might want to do undo and redo, so I'll put undo and redo up here. I can change the order of them if I'd like. I can put in here, maybe I want to have my reverse engineer. My model manager, maybe I want to do open from model manager as a button up here. What else do we have? If you have add-ins, you can add that as well. You can add toolbox items, so if I want to have like my table create, my select option. So you get the idea there. What you could do is you could just build this as much of it as you'd like, and whatever you use on it frequently, you can actually build this toolbar. And you can just turn on and turn off any one of these that you'd like. You can even have this floating out here so that you can just select the options as you're designing. So very nice to be able to build that. You can always do a reset, by the way, at any time. If you think you preferred the original settings, you just do reset toolbar. So custom toolbars is the next pointer I wanted to make. You're adding hotkeys, etc. We have some new layout options as well. So what you probably saw in the past when you worked with ERwin was that the layout was not the best. Like you would actually see that oftentimes the tables were kind of just arbitrarily laying one next to the other. Relationship lines would be going in every possible direction, and there was really no correlation between what you were seeing and what you were actually, the relationship between those objects. But now, because of some of the new layout features, the layout features not only neater when we actually build them, but you're going to see that there's going to be more logic to the design itself. So I'm actually going to reverse engineer a small database here. It's pubs from SQL Server. Then I'll just run for a minute here. And we'll see when the design is done that there's a lot of logic to what we're actually seeing here. By the way, I'm just zooming in and zooming out using this new feature here in the lower left. And since I'm showing you how to navigate here, I'm also going to show you this tool, which apparently was turned off here. Oh, there it is, overview, I should say. And this overview is another nice option here. It allows us to navigate around the diagram itself. And let me actually pull this out so you can see it functionally a little bit better. I can actually move this blue square around the screen, and that'll actually bring me around the model itself. I can actually resize this blue box, and that will actually zoom me in on the diagram itself. So a nice, convenient way. This is a small model, of course, but you can imagine with a very large model that this would be a very powerful tool to have. I'm just going to put this back. But from the point of view of the actual, we're actually seeing in the design itself, unlike what we saw in previous versions of ERwin, where things were just scattered from like left to right, and there was really no reasoning behind the layout, ERwin's trying to create as little layover on the relationship lines as possible. And what you end up seeing is not only do you see a very neat presentation of the data here, But you also see that this like titles table, for example, is very central to the design itself. You see how it's kind of all these relationships feeding off of it. And ERwin's taking that into account in the layout itself. So it's actually revealing a lot of what you need to see within, or what you want to discover within your data itself. There are multiple design options, and they're all available here. We have a circular layout. You have a hierarchical layout. You have orthogonal layout, symmetrical layout, and some of these are really useful depending on what you're actually using them for. Let's see if I can show you a good example of that. Where is my eMovies? Oh, that's not the one I wanted. I want my pubs diagram. There it is. So let's say that we want, and now there's 2 points actually on this. One is that you have the ability of not only having multiple layout options now, but also that you can be selective about what you're actually laying out. So I can select these tables here down below and select that this is going to be a tree layout, for example. And we see this version of the design. And then I can go back to the symmetric layout. And you see, once again, titles are very central. This is great layout, by the way, if you're doing dimensional modeling, that if your fact tables are almost always laid out dead center in your design. So it's a really nice feature there. Orthogonal layout, which is what we saw during the reverse engineer. It is a default layout when you do a new design. Hierarchical layout. So we're seeing the parent tables laid out up top. And you'll see that these other tables are actually just floating up here up top because I have not selected them for design. But like I could select those tables as well, and I could do like a circular layout on those. And they're actually down here in a circle. They're still selected, by the way, so I can just drag them over to the left or something if I'd like. So they're not laying on top of the other tables. These are only 2 tables, so there's not really any design there. But you see how you can very quickly start to have different layout options for the different settings, depending on what you're trying to present within the relationships of the objects themselves. Let me go back to the eMovies model because it's a little more complex. And by the way, this eMovies model is right in the install folder. So if you'd like to experiment with this, you're going to see very much a similar layout when you install the software and start working on it. Another change here in the software is the ability to create these bends in the relationship line. In the past, ERwin was forced you to have just 1 or maybe 2 bends in the relationship line, but you were very limited as far as how that was presented. Now you can have infinite bends if you'd like. So in this case, you'd never actually want to have this many bends in a relationship line. But I'm just showing that it is possible to do. So you can actually have like wrap around the other side of the table if you'd like, and sometimes you actually do need to have this amount of wrap around in the design. Let me show you with a new diagram how to build those relationship lines if you need to put those bends in there. Let's create 2 tables here and a relationship between them. And I'm just going to call this ID. So the way to create those multiple bends, we're all used to seeing this in ERwin. We just have that 1 single bend in the relationship lines. And the way you break off those additional, that like kind of stepping that you're going to see is by breaking them off the edge of the other table. So by dragging this above, I get my first bend, and now I drag it back over. Now I'm creating another bend, and I drag it again. And you can see you can make as many of these bends as you'd like. Another nice thing about the relationships, by the way, is that if we go back to the eMovies diagram, if I want to relay out this one relationship line, but I don't want to lay out all my relationship lines, I simply right-click on the relationship. I do reset relationship path. I've reset the relationship path for just this one relationship, not for all of them. And that's a key takeaway because obviously that's a nice feature to have. And I just undid that using just the undo. And I'll look at, there's much more granularity on the undo and redo, which was already very powerful to start with, but now we have even more granularity there, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So now let's take a look at annotations. I'm going to have to run through this a little bit because I do want to leave time for questions. So let me kind of speed things up just a little bit more. A lot of this I can cover pretty quickly. There's now annotations on mouse over. You mouse over any object and you see its definition. So you see that if you mouse over something, you have the definition that pops up, whether it's a relationship line, whether it's a table or an entity, I should say. So that's just automatic, and it's a nice new feature, especially when you're zoomed all the way out and you want to be able to know what you're looking at from a distance. You can actually just mouse over and see that's the employee table, that's the payment table. Once again, it's a small diagram, but you can imagine with thousands of tables, a very easy way to get around. Another thing we see here in the diagram as well, and this is something that was requested oftentimes, which was the ability of, let me just get this out of the way, my WebEx tool is in the way. So you actually have the ability of creating relationships between drawing objects and actual physical objects. So the nice thing about this, of course, is this is something that was never supported in the past. How would you have a pointer to an object and then move them around the screen, and then you have to keep moving the drawing object unrelated to the table it was associated to? Not anymore. You can add this. There's obviously no relationship associated to this, but from the perspective of the design, there's a relationship between those. Another nice feature, let me go to this another display here. And what we're seeing here is we're actually seeing themes. This is something that wasn't supported before. You probably were familiar with the fact that if you colored a certain object, an entity in one store display in one subject area, it looked the same everywhere. Now you can have themes, and I'll just show you how to create themes in just a moment. But what this actually allows you to do is have completely different views of the same data. Now, what I wanted to point out here, if we zoom in a little bit, and once again, the WebEx tool is in the way, you actually have the ability of going into your properties of the drawing, of the diagram you've actually created. And this is under our table options or entity options. And you see there's a tab for all of this different information. But in the entity or table options, you can specify show attribute columns as grid. If I turn this off, you'll see in the background there that, for example, the table name and the FK are all abutted with each other. In the past, you've probably noticed you add your, is it a primary key member, is it a foreign key member, what is the data type, what is the null option, and before you know it, you have these long, ugly strings, and they're very hard to read for presentation purposes. Turn on the show column settings here, and for example, if I turn on my data type, and we'll see this happening live in the background, and I'll turn on my null option, and we'll see the presentation of it is much cleaner now. Oh, I forgot to accept those changes. Let me go back here again. Once again, data type and null option, and accept that. And here we go. So now you see that it's actually presenting it as a table instead of showing everything bunched together. It's much easier to read. You can see how much easier this is to read if you want to print this out for somebody to see that information. So that's a new feature as well. And once again, it's right in the display properties for table or entity. And you can turn it, and basically entity, obviously, just a logical display, table, the physical. The other thing I wanted to specify here as well is you have page settings for each and every diagram. So these diagrams, once again, we're going to discuss how the granularity that's going to give you in your design. But you'll notice there's a page setup tab. And what this allows you to do is to have different settings for each and every one of your diagrams. So you can have different specifications here, and they can be independent of each other. So when they print out, you can have them specified at the diagram level rather than at just the model level. Going back to this issue, because I do think people will encounter this sometimes. Let me go back to this SAP model I had. The relationship lines. When you convert your model, your relationship lines are going to be buried in the back of your drawing objects. This can be pretty bad as far as showing the design, and this could be troubling if you want to get something into production quickly. But you just go into your properties, layout, and you turn on where is it? Display lines on top. Did I do that? Is it in the wrong one here? I don't know where that setting is. I will have to follow up with you guys on that because there is simply a checkbox to turn on, and I'm just getting familiar with all these tabs myself. So we'll table that for a moment so we can cover a little bit more before we move on to question and answers. Callouts. You have callouts here on your relationship lines. This is something that's new as well. And this is also just another property of the display. But you have the ability, for example, if I go back to this main display, if you moved relationship lines, or I should say your verb phrases around in the past, oftentimes you wouldn't know what relationship the verb phrase actually referred to. So when you click and you drag, you actually see a little dashed line there, which is showing what this object that I'm dragging around is actually related to. So of course this is nice because it makes it much easier to know, for example, if you had receives and is made of right next to each other, you wouldn't know which refer to which relationship. Simply start moving it and you'll see the call out, which shows you what the relationship to what object is. So that's a nice little feature. Another nice feature here that only half existed in the previous version of ERwin, in the 7.x versions, is the ability to go back and forth from the design to the Explorer and back again. So for example, in 7.x you could go here and select go to diagram, and it would actually highlight the table within the diagram itself. However, what if I wanted to, let's say we have, once again, a very large model, thousands of tables, hundreds of tables. How do I quickly jump into the Explorer from the object I'm actually looking at? I can actually right-click and say go to Model Explorer, and then it will be highlighted within the Model Explorer itself. From the printout perspective, I just want to show you some of the print options. Oh, this is the print preview. Let me go back to my ERwin. Let me close my print preview. I actually wanted to go into the print editor. And I just wanted to mention here that you actually can specify the current diagram or all diagrams, and then specify the order of the printout from right and down or down and then across. So that's another change there in the software. And there's spell checking. So most of the, if you go into like comments or something like that, I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can add languages if you'd like to, but basically there's a basic spell check built into all of the editors. So you can actually do, when you're putting comments in or something, it'll check that your spelling is correct. All the editors now have a couple of really key features that I want to show you. I'll just show you this from the perspective of the table editor, but all the editors have this similar behavior. One is that you can actually do filtering up top. So if I start typing employee up here, for example, you'll see that I end up with just my employee table, or if I start typing customer and customer credit. So you'll see that that's a good way to filter down your objects. Once again, because you can actually navigate from any object now to any other object from within a single editor, of any entity to another entity, any table to another table, any column to another column. You want to be able to have some kind of granularity there. So you want to have this option of searching and filtering to give you a limited set to look at. Another nice option here is this Where Used tab. All objects now have this Where Used, so you can see, for example, this table, customer here. If I go to Where Used, it tells me what subject areas it exists in. It tells me what any kind of different objects that are using it, or where the object actually exists. This is very useful when you're looking at particularly, like, let's say, an attribute. Where does that attribute exist? Or a domain. If you have a domain that exists in hundreds of tables, what tables is it actually being used in? So pretty powerful tool to have here as well, Where Used, and this is new in in 8.x, I should say. Did not exist in 7.x. It's a nice new feature. Another key feature here as well is this ability of have granular undo and redo. In the past, the undo and redo occurred within the context of the model, the design area of the software. So you would actually make all your changes in the editor, and then you would actually exit the editor. And then if you did an undo, you would undo everything that occurred within the editor, not a single change within the editor itself. What's nice now is the ability of having the ability of stepping backwards through your changes one at a time within the context of the editor. So if I actually go here and I change this domain on this particular table, and change this null option to null. Oh, I can't make that null because it's PK. Let's change the data type and change this constraint option, and then apply a different style. So I've made all these changes, but I can actually, you'll see that the undo and redo is available here. I can actually step backwards one at a time and make the change one at a time to now this has been turned back on again. My SQL Server tab. I go back to an integer, and then of course I could step forward and make those changes again, one at a time. So nice ability of having that undo and redo within the actual editors themselves. Okay, so live updates, granular redo, undo, object filtering. Histories are now held as notes. I'm not going to go into detail too much with that. Anyone who's had issues with history in the past, they're now saved as notes, and it does not make the models gigantic and slow, especially when you save them to the model manager. This is a significant change. Your model managers are much faster now. So if you've encountered that in the past, just know that it's improved. You know, from the context of your day-to-day usage, it's not really something you're going to see all the time. Where used, of course, I mentioned. Themes. You actually have the ability of creating themes. They can be at the diagram area, like we see here, that the diagrams can have different behaviors, different looks and feels, each one. We can put them at the object level, so I can actually create a style change here. Let me do the eMovies theme. So we see I've changed just this one object. So you can change the objects. You can change it. You can apply behaviors to objects. You can apply behaviors to entire themes. You can create exclusions. So maybe the object behaves a certain way all the time, and then it's exclusively not behaving that way in one particular diagram. So, you know, very powerful. You want to easily identify what your fact tables are based on a color that you're applying. You want to have a color to a particular column from a, you know, maybe you have a semantic layer that you're trying to define, and wherever that column exists, you want to have a particular font that defines it. Very easy to point them out simply by color coding them and things like that. So very powerful, you know, I'm going to keep playing with this and come up with different scenarios where I think it's really useful, and I'll use them in future webinars, but just kind of want to introduce it to kind of put the seed in your minds to start using these features. And quickly, because I know people have questions and we're almost out of time, quickly I do want to just mention that we do have the ability of diagrams, I should say, what the difference with diagrams are. The difference between diagrams and stored displays is not only that you could apply these themes with different behaviors, more powerful than that, and we've never had this feature before. When you build a new diagram, and let me just build a new one here really quickly, and I'm just going to call this new diagram. You can actually include all or partial list of tables. You can, like people would say in the past, I want to not see views in a particular stored display, but I want them in my subject area. Can I do that? Yes, you can do that now. Relationships, maybe you do want to show relationships. Maybe you don't want to show relationships. Maybe this is going to be very high level. You just kind of want to show like an activity view of your diagram, and you don't want to see those relationships going all over the place. You can do that. You want to show identifying relationships, but not non-identifying relationships. You can do that. You want to have a display that has generated objects and another one that does not. You can do that. So you have different layout features for each one of these diagrams. It's very, very powerful feature. And I know oftentimes this has happened where you want to have one subject area with 40 accounting tables, but people had always asked, how do we create like 3 different diagrams or 3 different levels within that subset of objects? And I want to actually just generate SQL based on that subset of objects. Can I do that? You can do that now. Not via the Forward Engineer. Forward Engineer still filters only on subject areas. But if you do a complete compare to a blank model or to a live environment, you can actually filter based on the diagrams themselves. So you can see there's a whole other layer now to your actual design. And we can start talking about creating semantic layers, and there's a lot of really nice features. And if you're really curious about that, I think that's probably going to be the next topic, so definitely stay tuned. I'll update you all when that's going to be available. I did want to just quickly mention that there's new reporting features, and this is probably something we're going to have to look at in much more detail in the future. We have a bulk editor now. It's like the data browser, but it allows you to edit the objects live in the system. You can use macros. You can copy and paste like in bulk to that editor, make changes all at once. You can see the impact in the diagram live. You can export that tabular report to Excel, have your users actually modify the Excel spreadsheet, and then just copy and paste it right back into ERwin and make live changes to your model. Very, very powerful. And as far as graphical reporting, this is a significant change, by the way. it's going to be using this built-in Crystal Reports. Crystal Reports has the developer version of it. If you have anybody who's a real Crystal Reports ace in your company, you can really implement them to build some really powerful reports for you. But they do come with a bunch of pinned reports, but this is going to have a bit of a learning curve. And once again, I think this is going to be a very popular topic. So this is probably something we're going to have to take into another webinar or maybe a class or something to expand on. So speaking of that, and unfortunately I didn't have enough time to actually cover those Crystal reporting at the end there, but let's jump to question and answers just a moment. I do want to just have one more poll, and the poll is actually to ask all of you, what would you like to see the next webinar topic to be? So we have some options here. Is the poll live? Okay. I'm not seeing it. Okay. And let me exit out of here because I'm not seeing the poll. But, so yeah, if we want to continue with this R8 features, these new features set at a very high level, do you want to talk about the bulk editor for anybody who's familiar with it? You know, see that feature set, how to navigate it. Crystal Reports, of course. Do you want to see the API and FET customization? FET, the forward engineer templates. If you're not familiar with those, it just allows you to create custom SQL syntax. More data warehousing, a live consultation. The data warehousing webinar we had last week was very successful. If you didn't attend, it's available on demand. But I was thinking that maybe, because there were so many questions, maybe we could have like an open chat and people could join in and come with their specific pain points, or maybe something they're trying to implement, integrating different systems, and then we can do like a live consultation for everybody to sit in on, or if you're not sure about what you'd like to see. And while you're taking that, let me just mention one more thing, resources that could be useful for everybody. YouTube, ERwin.com, of course, great. If you haven't been there before, great content there. Follow me, of course, and I'll give you all my contact information. And then blogs, which I have one, but also other tech blogs. And of course, a lot of blogs are available right from from ERwin.com itself. Also, other forums that are really useful, like Info Advisors. Karen Lopez's group, very powerful, very huge user group. Use LinkedIn and use YouTube to meet other groups that might, either online via YouTube or live, via LinkedIn or Meetup. You can find like DAMA chapters, SQL Server developers chapters, very active. This is something that's growing more and more. And you're seeing a lot of events. A lot of them are free or at a very nominal fee, and it allows you to network and see what is going on and what people are doing with the same technology. So I know we're over time, but I do want to take some questions. So do we have any questions?
All right, one of our first questions is the DM Mart administrator a separate license?
Yes. The administrator, you will have a separate license for the administrator. So that'll be provided for you. So the method of that, let me just jump to ERwin. I should have shown you this while I had it up. I'm going to share it again. Basically, if you do not have a model manager license, this will not be available for you. If you have a Workgroup edition, but not administrator, you're simply Workgroup edition, you would have the connection ability, and that connection is going to allow you to connect to the repository. And just like you would do with the model manager now, what you would normally be doing from the services menu is going to be, you're going to connect, and then all these things are going to become activated to you. If you are going to initialize the model mart or upgrade, if you have that permission, then this is actually going to be activated, initialize Mart. But this is all based on licenses. So basically what you're going to see, one person is going to have initializer license. All the model manager users are going to have this Workgroup Edition license, and people who are not going to be using the model manager will have the standard edition licenses. If you have Navigator, if it's read-only, you have a Navigator Edition license. But it all depends on what license you have on your PC.
All right, and what happens with multiple MAC addresses on one machine?
They will actually work. You have no problem if you have the.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if everybody was hearing me there, but if you have multiple MAC addresses, it works as long as the MAC address is available. So I actually had that experience where I had two MAC addresses. I had a physical MAC address and a wireless MAC address, and that's why I specified use the wireless MAC address. The wireless MAC address will be consistent. If you're using your LAN MAC address, it's possible that depending on what network you're connecting to, you might see a different MAC address. So use the wireless MAC address. That's going to be consistent even if you're connecting from multiple offices, working from home, etc. So, but as long as the MAC address exists, period, you'll be successful. So if you have like a virtualized environment and you're seeing 3 MAC addresses, as long as the MAC address is valid at that time, even if there's multiple MAC addresses, it's a valid license.
Okay, what if you're running ERwin on Citrix if licenses are based on MAC address?
That's a similar situation that we're seeing with the VMware. You will need to have, you can on Citrix and on VMware, you can actually specify an explicit MAC address, and then you can make it static so it does not reset every time you connect again. So that would be the method I would suggest. So basically set up the environment so it has a static MAC address, provide that MAC address to the licensing team, and then you'll have that. And the MAC, by the way, the license files will actually have the MAC address in the description. So it's very easy to align that LIC file, which is just the type of file that it is, with the particular environment that you need to install it on. But that's the strategy you're going to have to use. Make sure that that MAC address is static. If it's going to be changing constantly, the license will not be valid when they try to reconnect.
Have any additional support for schemas been added with versions 8? Specifically, is there any way to display the schema in the table list of the Physical Model Explorer?
From the schema list, well, yes, in a way. Well, not natively, I should say. There is a method where you can actually update the display level of the entities themselves, so they prefix with the schema owner, and then the display level is alphabetical, so you would see them grouped together. So that's how that would be the workaround. It's not going to come right out of the box, but it doesn't require much tweaking to get the behavior you're probably looking for.
Will there be a lot of changes to the SCAPI interface?
To which is it?
SCAPI.
Oh, that's okay. No, the API is staying the same. So the actual code, by the way, my current code works on 7.x and on 8.x. So there's not going to be. Many of you may have had 7.2 code. You needed to modify for 7.3 because the metadata changed. There's no fundamental change to the metadata. Your code is 90% of the time going to execute correctly. There is new metadata, like where used, for example, that you probably want to build like applications around. That's a new feature. But if you have, like, for example, you're updating your comments, the metadata tags are the same. The SCAPI works the same way.
Does migration preserve existing line routing?
Yes, I was about to say that's a good question, but I'm pretty certain that it does because even like that SAP model that I migrated today has the relationship lines are exactly the same. So that I don't think that there'll be any issues with that. I have not seen it. There might be certain circumstances where it changes it, but I don't think so.
Okay. What is the cost for a seat license for a model Mart? And then if I have a 7.3.1 and have current maintenance with CA, can I
We'll have
Okay. There's only 2 more.
Yeah. No, but we'll have we'll have someone contact you about pricing.
Can you see entities tables not assigned to any subject area?
Yes.
And then will my 7.3.1 customized SET template still work in version 8?
I believe there should not be any conflict with that. I can double check it, but like I said, the API works successfully, and I think that there, once again, that metadata is integrated under the covers, and I think that's all, it's all going to work cleanly. I have to verify that, but I'm pretty certain that it should work out.
Is the DD editor sizable?
The DD editor? I'm not sure what the DD, was that the bulk editor that you mean? If it's the bulk editor, yes, and as a matter of fact, all of the editors are resizable, so I'm not sure exactly what you were mentioning there, but it probably is the case. For example, even within like the entity editors, you can now customize that look and feel. You can actually make some longer, some shorter, and you can customize all that.
Domain dictionary.
Oh, the domain dictionary, yes, it is.
Any additional database vendors
Anybody added?
supported out of the box?
New, I don't believe there's anybody new there. I mean, Teradata, like we've added full feature support for certain databases, like Teradata 13.x, Oracle 11.x is going to be available in the Service Pack 1, and and of course SQL Server is broken apart, DB2, but no new, like there's no, like I know like on the last webinar people asked about Netezza, there's no new Netezza support, for example, or anything like that.
Do you want the polls?
I'll just speak to this last slide here before we wrap up. If you do want to email me on anything, ca.erwin@programmers.com. My blog is maximumdatamodeling.blogspot.com. You can follow me on Twitter. It's just Max Data Modeling. And LinkedIn, if you can't read that whole URL, you can actually just go to the groups and just type in Maximum Data Modeling with spaces, and you'll find my information there.
And for all other product information and pricing, you can contact us at 800-221-7710 or on the website www.programmers.com/CA. Seeing no more questions, we want to thank everybody for attending today, and we look forward to our next webinar next month. Thanks and have a great day.